Okay, good morning everybody. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022, and we're going to get started here with our pre-market analysis on the S&P 500 futures market. What I want to quickly do is review what happened here yesterday morning. So we came into the open, I believe we saw, let's see, we had just pushed up into 45, 46, 45.50 area in the overnight session. And we talked about a pullback into 45.13 to 45.16 down here, a little bit deeper down into 45.03. And those were kind of our two targets to the downside. We also, just before the open in the room, I didn't talk about this in the pre-market, but in the trading room, as we were coming into the open, we talked about this little zone right here where our orange power level sits. So we had the orange power level itself at 26.50. We had some swing highs back here up into 27 quarter, I guess. So we had basically a little 1 point range in here that we expected to potentially see maybe a bounce or a push through and then to sell the back end for that sell into 45.13. So let's see what happened here. Market opened right around where you see my cursor here, and there is that first expected support zone. So what happened was we held the 200 moving average, we came down and we came right into the orange power level. And I remember telling the trade room what I'd like to see here is the market to come down, get below the power level. And if that could happen, then I'd be interested in selling the market, again, expecting that target down into this 16 to 13 zone. The other thing I said was if we could hold above the power level, then that might be a little bit of a clue that the bulls are still in power. So I went ahead and threw a limit order in right here, and as you can see, we got a really nice push out of there at 26, went all the way up to 46 for the pullback. Now, what's really awesome is that this 45.46 is a new eye level that we've had on the charts for about a week or a week and a half ever since we moved over to the new contract and I put these new eye levels on. Look at what the high of the morning was, 45.46. It literally came right to the power level and the eye level and failed from there. So pretty interesting there. Also interesting to note that we started this nice bullish run. We pulled back, or the market pulled back, came right into our 200 moving average here. It's where I called another trade. Now the issue is the market came back to retrace that and test the lows, and then it went. So for me, I actually got out of that trade, but pretty decent little push right to that first expected resistance level, our 45.46 eye level. And then the market started going sideways. So what I did was I drew a wedge here, and originally it came from all the way down at this low up to the lows we were making, I guess over here somewhere. And I told everyone within this little range right here, we probably don't want to be trading because it's going to be sideways and choppy. And that was back when I first started drawing this. I don't remember exactly when, but I drew across the top, and then I started drawing something coming across the bottom here. And I just want to show you what ended up happening. We came right to the top of the trend line there and failed, like literally a nice double top, tested it a second time and failed. And when it failed, came right down into the bottom of that triangle and bounced out of it and actually held it on two occasions there. And then we eventually broke through. So I just thought that was kind of a funny coincidence because this happened, like I said, just around over here, I want to say. So we drew it in, and then I think like 10, 15 minutes later, came right into it, failed, and then came right to the bottom and bounced. And then if you were in the trade room yesterday, you remember that we finished trading somewhere right around here when we came down right into the bottom of the triangle there. And then soon after that, we finally broke through, right? So we had this nice triangle. The market comes down, it gets down and holds the back end and starts to sell off from there. And then we get through the orange power level. So in the chat room, I'm not going to bring it up, but I put an alert out that we have finally broken through the OPL, our orange power level. And so we could very well see a push down to the lows of the overnight session, I believe is what I said, which was down again over all the way down below 45.03. So as we broke below the power level, there's my first short right off of the 34 EMA. And again, I took that down into 45.13, and then I added down here when we tested the 34 EMA once again. So the crossover happened back here. 34 got below the 200, and ever since then, it was a little sideways for a second, but then a seller's market, and I was able to take advantage of some very low risk trade entries that, again, had it have gone against me, I would have been out within a few ticks of that high. So really low risk. And then, of course, when I added to my position, that's when the whole thing kind of found its bottom, and then we started trekking higher. And that's kind of where we, and then there's the crossover there. The 8 got above the 2, or the 34 got above the 200, and from there got this really nice rip higher. And basically ever since midday yesterday, we've been in a very strong bullish push here. And if you look at the 34, basically ride the 34 up the entire time. You could have taken trades off the 34 EMA, and it really never broke more than a point, maybe a point and a half. In basically every test came down and held within a few ticks, and you could have been adding and adding and adding and piling a bunch of positions long here if you were trading. So that's where we find ourselves this morning, still in this strong bullish push. So let's go ahead and jump up. We've already covered the ultra high time frames, and like I said, not too much new going on up there. But now that we're starting to push and break out, we might have to revisit that stuff. The first thing I want to point out is that we said yesterday that on the monthly, if we could get through the previous monthly high, which was 45.78.75, remember that was basically the high of the double top that we've been watching. If we get through there, we're now going to have a nice strong bullish monthly bar, again getting through the high of the previous month. That would be a bullish clue, and so that's what happened here. Over the course of the last 12 hours, we've gotten through the previous monthly high. So that is a new thing to note on the higher time frames. I think outside of that, the quarterly still basically looks the same, and our weekly, you can see where there is that double top back at 78.75 or whatever that was, and now we're getting through. So weekly also, don't think there's really anything new there per se, but yeah, that's what we're seeing on the higher time frame. So let's get down into the daily. And on the daily, remember yesterday, actually a few days ago, we talked about the first potential divergence here back on March 22nd. And from there, we did on March 23rd, almost retrace the entire previous daily bar. But then the bulls, of course, jumped right back in. So this is a beautiful example of a failed signal, right? So the signal formed, we got a little bit of a reaction, but then it jumped right in and we went against it. So that was a failed signal. This was a false signal yesterday. So remember yesterday, we said there's a potential bearish divergence from the high of the daily candle. However, and I'm glad I said this yesterday, I said to you guys, even though we have a potential bearish divergence on the daily, I think what's going on here is we're actually just gaining a lot of strength. So I don't know if I would want to really rely on that bearish signal, because now we're getting up into a very strong part of the chart. And sure enough, the bulls just continued to push here. We've come up and, we've broken through that high. Let me just make sure. I don't want to say something that we didn't do, but 77.75, high 72.25. So we're just about there. I guess technically, since we didn't get through this 78.75, I thought we did, but hold on a second here. 77.75, the high of the overnight session, 72. So I guess technically, we still can argue there's divergence off this high if we don't break that high at 77.75. I thought, give me a second here. I thought that 45, 78, 75. What am I mixing up here? Oh. Oh my lord. My chart wasn't moved over. I was like, am I going crazy here? I think I'm going crazy. Okay. Hello. Um, so we no longer have a divergence, right? Because we got through the 78.75, which I thought we did when I was talking on the monthly there. And so we've pushed up to new highs. The RVI's pushed up to new highs. So that signal that we were looking at as a potential setup yesterday was essentially a failed signal. So it showed a potential signal. I'm sorry, a false signal. Potentially showed a bearish signal, but then the bulls just continued to rip right on through. So that is a perfect example of a false signal. It didn't really actually follow through with anything. This one down here, we actually did get follow through, but it kind of failed and continued to go. So there we are today, and we've gotten through all the major resistances that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks now. So let's take a look at what we're dealing with up above now. So the last major swing low I was concerned with was right around 4,600, and we're busting through that here. So in the overnight session. So what do we have up above now that we're almost back to testing the all-time highs here? The first thing is I do have a shaded area right here, the range being 4702 down to 4690. So basically a 10-point range there from 4690 into 4700. That is a zone I'm not sure where it came from, but it is on there from a previous analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and let's bring this out to the 30th so we have it up there. All right, so that, I mean, that little pocket right there, we're going to go down into the shorter time frames, see where that might have come from. So let's take a look here. A few people just jumped in the room. Again, we are obviously breaking out, and all of the major resistances that we've been talking about for a few weeks are basically done with, right? We've pushed through everything. We got some really nice reactions and pullbacks off a lot of the levels. But now we're pushing up into some newer territory that I really, we haven't really looked at in a long time. So first thing I want to note is that we do have a swing right around this 46.17 area. Let's see. I'm trying to look for the most relevant zones, just like we were looking down here. And I think what we're going to have to do is jump down to the 60-minute and see where our eye levels are lining up with some of the stuff in the chart. But you can see right around here, we have kind of the end of a structure zone right around 46.30, 46.35. So just from that perspective, that would be my first target to the upside, somewhere around 46.35. And we'll refine these levels when we get down to the 60-minute chart. But we do have a pocket from 46.35 up into just about 46.59-ish. So that little pocket right there, and then we're up into that next structure zone that goes from, again, 46.59 to just about the top end of that shaded zone that we just talked about on the daily, which was just about 4,700. So we've got those three levels right above us here that I want you to be aware of coming into the open here from this larger perspective. So keep those three levels in on your charts this morning. Any further through 4,700, and we're basically testing the all-time highs. We have a little pocket up in here as well. So if we do start getting up there, that's another 150 points from where we are right now. We'll go back and revisit that. But be aware of those, and let's see from the 60-minute perspective with our eye levels what else we have going on up top. So go back here. 4630, 4660. So perfect. So up top here, let's take a look. 4631. Remember, that's the level that was the first kind of line where the structure ended. Right there is the target to the upside, and it looks like we already have it labeled here with a few lines, and that is one of our eye levels. So 31 would be a good target to the upside. 58 is that top of that beginning of that next structure zone. So that's a really good target to the upside. And then finally, that 4,700 area, it's a little bit of a range. We do have an eye level just in front at 84.75, and then we're up into the eye level at 95, and then there's a minor one at 03. So it's kind of a little bit of a zone rather than a specific level, but each of these individual levels very well could have a trade right off of them. So keep in mind, in the most immediate area of the chart to the upside, this is the expected resistance zones that we do have. On the flip side of things, we got to look at if the market starts to pull back, what targets we could have for the downside, and what areas could we expect there to be a bounce or an area where the bulls could potentially jump in. So let's take a look here. It might make sense because we want to kind of zoom in to the last day's price action here. It might make sense to zoom in to the 30-minute chart for that. So I'm going to come down into the intermediate time frames here, and we'll take a look at what we're dealing with if the market does pull back out of the open. So first things first, 4,600 itself is sitting here in the most aggressive level on a pullback. So just be aware, 4,600, a little bit deeper, is going to bring us right into the smaller retracement. So how can I put this? We've got the previous daily low pushing all the way to the overnight high, and that gives us our retracement levels for the entire leg. But we do technically have a little tiny push right here from basically the orange power level up, and 50% retracement of that into the 61 would be that resistance right there at 45.92.75. So just be aware of that swing right there, and I'll go ahead and get this on all the charts. Dotted line. That would be a level I'd be watching on a pullback. And then any deeper than that, I think it's going to bring us right back to our orange power level. And you guys know how this works, right? If we hold above the power level and above 50% of the previous day, these two major levels here, that is a clue that the bulls are going to stay strong. But I will be a little bit more sell biased if we start getting through that orange power level. You have to keep in mind that the market is really strong right now, and we're getting a very strong push. So at some point, there's got to be a pullback. I mean, there doesn't have to be, right? Just because the market's going up and going up doesn't mean it has to pull back. But typically, after a protracted push like this, there's going to be some type of correction eventually. So we want to be aware that, once getting through the power level, I might get a little bit more sell heavy to see if we can get that deeper pullback. And let's see here. I know it's a bit long in the tooth this morning. There's a whole bunch right in here. If we start to pull back, the market closed down here right around 45.70. So coming down to fill that gap is something that we see happen pretty often. We also have the previous daily high at 72.50, and then our eye level at 74. So that whole little chunk right there, let me move this out, is a nice little zone right there. So I'm going to highlight basically the close of yesterday, 45.70, up to our eye level at 74. That little area looks really nice to me. Again, the power level itself, the orange power level, also a potential support zone. Remember that swing low was 80.50, so there's like a little 1 point range here from 80.50 to 81.50 there. And then a little bit further down, the main thing I'm noticing here is this swing high at 48.50 down into the 61.8 and our eye level at 46. So we've got a little 2.5 point range down around the 61.8. So these are some of the levels I would expect to see hold this morning, or at least get some type of reaction. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that swing high down over to that. So what's the high? 48.50. Apply that, lock it in place, and adjust all charts. Okay, so there's that swing, there's the 46, and then we're down into 50% of the previous day, 45.31, and then right back into 45.13 and the low of yesterday. So these are some of the zones in the most immediate area I'd be looking at on the pullbacks. Of course, there's one other zone here that I'm going to have to label, and that is 50% of the whole push at 45.60.50, and that's it for this morning. We're right to the open, so we're going to have to jump down to our short time frames and get with our members here and start looking for some trades. So let me make sure that that's on there. Perfect. All right, and we're off. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.